Hello, I am Lucas. This is Strike the Sun MD, and I chose that name because it looks like Dr. Strike the Sun in a way, but also I chose it because my favorite novel is Moby Dick, which I'd like to discuss now. MD, of course, being Moby Dick, and Strike the Sun coming from a turn of phrase that Captain Ahab uses, I believe, twice. He uses it very early on, and then I recall seeing it again later, near the end of the novel. So that's where that comes from. I feel very clever for thinking of it. I digress. Anyway, I want to discuss the novel as a sort of review, and why I love it and appreciate it, and continue to read it again and again every year. As you probably well know, given that Moby Dick is everything is sort of saturated with some aspect of Moby Dick or the whale. It is a novel, a story told from the perspective of Ishmael, a restless young man. I guess he might not be young necessarily. We don't know how old he is. And he's, as he says, many years ago, never mind how long, or something to that effect. So, anyway, during the narrative, he is a young man, most assuredly, that takes to sea whenever he becomes restless, normally as a merchant, but according to him, it was the fates that chose, not he himself, that chose for him to go on a whaling expedition. And along the way from Manhattan to Nantucket, he meets Queequeg, a harpooner who has killed many whales in his lifetime, and is also a cannibal, whom he forms a strong, intimate relationship with, and boards upon the Pequod, a whaling vessel captained by Captain Ahab, a man deeply bent, hell-bent on revenge against Moby Dick, the white whale. It's that alone, that sort of build-up is enticing. Okay, we've got a guy who becomes friends with a cannibal, and he thinks that the fates chose him to go on this whaling vessel, which is captained by a madman, to get revenge on a single animal somewhere on this planet. Okay. Now, many people have read it, and many people love it, and I think almost anyone could love it. I've never read an abridged version. I imagine it is a much tighter narrative. It is much shorter. It would have to be much shorter. There are a massive number of chapters that I can see getting cut out for the sake of keeping the plot focused, because you get through the first 30 chapters and you think, wow, this is fantastic. The character developments, the character relations, the plot, they're all running smoothly. There's all these high culture references to the Bible and to the fates, and we've got a lot of interesting things to, free will, themes to think about: free will versus fate, and man versus nature, and man versus himself, and so on and so forth. And then we've got like 100 more chapters, and very few of them actually advance anything in any meaningful way. Starting, I believe, with the chapter about gams, or it's the chapter about the classification of whales, which is a dreadfully difficult chapter to read. Gams are not so bad because we see them from time to time, and Captain Ahab and a gam, the captains and the first mates will meet on the open ocean and discuss business. Have they seen any whales from where they're coming from, or transfer letters that have come from whatever port they were in? And time again, Ahab always asks, have you seen the white whale? And he always gets a different response, which in a way really builds up the relationship between Ahab and the whale, and just builds up the whale to be a monster in this way. But how much of a monster is he really? I mean, certainly he's got the size, but he is a wild animal. So is there any malicious intent? We don't know, but we've got plenty of chapters that sort of ponder on these things and ponder about the maliciousness of the whale, of whaling, I suppose, of man himself, his relationship to his nature, to himself, to others, to everything. And it's a really poetic and beautiful, philosophical diatribe, I suppose. I don't know what else to call it. There's just chapters upon chapters that don't really advance anything, but it gets you in the mind of Ishmael, which is great. One thing that I do imagine that reading the abridged version would be better, especially for someone coming into it, and then maybe on a reread coming to an unabridged version. It is my belief, I don't think Melville necessarily thought this way, but maybe it's just how I rationalize the inclusion of these chapters. As beautiful as they are, they don't really advance anything, and they could be cut out, which is why we have abridged versions. They are worthwhile, worth reading, in my opinion. As much as we've got chapters about whaling and about philosophy and considering all these strange inconsistencies and incongruities and what have you about man and nature and man's arrogance, I don't know. But we have a lot about whaling, right? And we've got a lot about whales and how whales and whaling was understood at the time. It sort of acts as a port of knowledge, right? You can come in and out and gain things, or maybe you can be sort of like a gam. You know, you make contact with this book to get a better understanding of whether the information is accurate or not is irrelevant, I think, because, I mean, I don't even know if, I guess I don't know if what Herman Melville put in here was known to be inaccurate at the time of publication. I don't know if that is the case. I know I've read that a lot of the things are wrong, and some of them just, even if I don't know they're wrong, for my own knowledge, sometimes it does seem like, is that true? I don't. Anyway, if he did do that on purpose, it was probably for a reason, right? He put all of this in here for a reason. I don't really know what the reason was, other than probably to have it, you know, stand the test of time, and like, here's what this business venture was like, and everything everyone thought about, and every aspect of it, whales themselves, how whaling was done, how you got the oil, what gams were. And I think it's worthwhile just for that sort of treasure trove of knowledge, whether it's accurate or not. Another thing, an adverse effect of those chapters that don't advance the plot, I do believe that they have an adverse effect in that when you read those chapters, when you think of the beginning of the novel, and if you know the end, then you definitely, in my opinion, every time I reread it, I do sort of think like, yes, I've been over this, I've read this before, I already know. What I want to see is the whale, is some plot. I want to get to the whale. Wait a second. My entire focus is the white whale, Moby Dick. I want to encounter the white whale and continue on with this story that was going places and fantastic. Who could I possibly relate to in that sense? Certainly Ishmael has no beef with the white whale. Ah, no. It's Captain Ahab, isn't it? He is bent on revenge. He is seeking the white whale. He, not bribes, he posts a little golden doubloon from, I believe, Lima, or Peru, Lima, Peru, yes, and says the first person who sees the white whale will get that. It's worth about however much, I forgot now, but whoever sees the white whale will get that. And in that sense, I think all those chapters have an ulterior, maybe not an ulterior, a secondary purpose in that they help you relate to this monstrous man who wants nothing but revenge. His hate is so pure that he's blinded by logic and reason, and all he has is passion. And you can sort of see how and why he's thinking it. In a way, in a way it's not quite the same. I think largely it is not revenge he's seeking. I think Captain Ahab is a power-hungry sort of guy. And when he lost his leg, he felt sort of emasculated. We won't get into any sort of Freudian discussion of losing his leg, but he feels sort of like he's been knocked down a peg and he wants to be on top, and so his ambition and drive to be the best was cut down by the whale, and he's seeking revenge so he can feel like he's the he's the one in power. That's sort of how I feel. Maybe that's not necessarily true, but that's how I felt after reading it this time. Yeah, and I think those chapters, again, they help you sort of see what he's like, but when and get into his mindset of I just want to see the whale. But when you do see the whale, you realize, much like him, he does not realize it because he's so blinded, but you are not Ahab. You wanted to see the whale, but once you do, you realize you were totally unprepared for what was to come. And yeah, I really love this book. If you've never read it, I imagine the abridged version is better to get into than the long version. It's the unabridged version is very long. I don't know how long an unabridged, or it's about 600 pages or something for unabridged. I don't know how long an abridged version would be. I can't even imagine how many chapters would be cut, but it's probably like half the size at least. So anyway, it's totally worth watching. Thank you, bye. I will be back to talk about some other books. So thank you, bye.